going on YouTube? It's your boy LS Grinder, LS Grinder Vlogs. Today, we're going to hear the reaction from a lot of people about Donald Trump's bill passing, the big beautiful bill, and what it means for you if you live in America. Let's get into it.
So Donald Trump's big beautiful bill has officially passed the House by the narrowest of margins, 215 to 214. Now, I want to just go over a few details that are in this bill. There's a lot of good things in this bill, and there's also just a few bad things that I think are absolutely unnecessary. So the tax cuts he implemented in 2017 will now be permanent. I believe there's no more tax on overtime, and I think you can deduct your tips up to a certain point. It's not full, just no tax. Child tax credit goes from $2,000 to $2,500. We have this new thing called Trump accounts where they offer you a $1,000 savings account if you have a child born before the end of Trump's second term. More money for border security. There is now Medicaid work requirements, which I think is a good thing. There are tons and tons of people that are able-bodied and can physically work and then just aren't, and they're on Medicaid. There's a few things here I didn't even know were in it. There's an American-made car tax break. Introduces a $10,000 tax incentive for purchasing vehicles manufactured in the U.S. and imposes a 5% tax on money transferred sent abroad. So a lot of migrants, what they'll do is they'll come over here and work and they'll send their money back home. Now they have to pay a tax on that. Now for the few things that I think are not good. The SALT deduction cap goes from $10,000 to $30,000. This mainly benefits rich people. And before Trump signed his 2017 one, there was no cap on this. So bringing it down to $10,000 was really good. There are cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, but we don't 100% know what these cuts actually are. So potentially it could be harmful, but we're not 100% sure yet. And the debt ceiling will increase by $4 trillion, which is a lot. And I believe this does still add to the deficit because I think we're still spending more than we're bringing in. I do believe overall this bill will be good for the average everyday American. We'll just have to wait and see what happens in the Senate. Because if it's this narrow in the House, you can guarantee the Senate's going to be the same way. What do you guys think about this bill?
Well, it looks like after July 4th, you can say goodbye to any chance of generational wealth in your family. You thought that house was going to be passed down to you. You thought those funds that your parents had worked a lifetime to save for you. No, because with the Medicare and Medicaid cuts, all that is in jeopardy. Most long-term nursing home care in the U.S. is paid for by Medicaid, not Medicare. Middle-class people often spend down savings to qualify. Without Medicaid support, families could be forced to cover $8,000 to $12,000 a month out of pocket. That can obliterate home equity, savings, and retirement accounts, the very assets that are meant to be passed down to children. These cuts could tighten eligibility and impose work requirements, could even disqualify vulnerable people. Rolling back provider funding means fewer nursing homes may accept Medicaid patients or may cut staff, lowering care quality. And some provisions aim to cap or block states from using flexible funding models that have made care accessible in high-cost states. So what's the result? One parent's Alzheimer's diagnosis could equal house gone, retirement gone, inheritance gone. Instead of building generational wealth, they'll go broke paying for basic care. And Let's look here. What's being said. No one goes on vacation until the big, beautiful bill is on his desk by the 4th of July. That's their plan. We've got days. This is altering everyone's futures. This is not just another piece of legislation. This is not the status quo. This is not business as usual. This is changing the distribution of wealth in the United States, ensuring that even more of it goes to the top. Don't say we didn't tell you.
Did you know there's a bill that's about to pass that will close hospitals in most small towns? If you're used to the convenience of having a hospital in your small town or close, then you're going to have to find another place to go because a lot of them is going to close. And when I say a lot, I mean about all. You will have to go to bigger cities to get health care. Not only that, about 16 million Americans is about to get kicked off health care. And a lot of them are low-income people that's been on it for years. Some people have took advantage of the system, and some people really need it. They're also talking about maybe having to close nursing homes. And I know a lot of you, you might not like this because you voted for Trump or whatever, but that is a part of his policy. And, before we just root for something or, say, hey, that's what we want, we need to think about the people around us. When they're talking about closing nursing homes, and then really the people who's going to suffer are Republicans. And the reason why is because most of the red states that have these rural areas and, really small towns that have hospitals are going to be the ones to fill it. And there's a lot more in it too. There is some good stuff in this bill, but at the end of the day, that threw me for a loop. Like, I'm thinking about all these people, 16 million Americans being kicked off health care, and there's going to be some casualties involved in that. Some of those people didn't take advantage of the system, so that can't be the argument. I kind of hope this bill might not make it, or at least that part of it gets revised. And healthcare is tricky because, instead of just thinking about the people that's taking advantage, we got to think about the people who's fell between the cracks. I have a cousin who has seizures, and they're going to take his healthcare. He can't work. He can't do nothing. He's currently fighting for disability. Like, I don't know, and he told me that, and we don't think about it till it hits close to home. So just pray for our country, man, and pray for better days, and that something gets fixed in this, even if it does pass, that they don't strip all these Americans of this health care. And I'm not taking up for no political party, because I'm definitely not a Democrat. You know how I feel about Joey B. and Kamala. But, me and Trump has a lot of differences, too. I think that no president can please everybody. That's just a fact of it. And some people's going to be stepped on in the process. I pray y'all look into this. And before discrediting me or coming here arguing what he's going to do, read this bill. Because it was read on the floor last night, word for word. And I watched the whole thing. I encourage y'all not to watch the news a lot of times because of the negativity and the lies. But at the same time, you can go in here and find these on direct sources and look them up. This video went a little bit overboard. I overshared, but y'all, my heart really goes out for people that's in need. Have a great day.
In that new bill, they changed the SNAP benefit requirements. And this, I'm not going to say shit, but what is in there. And I'm going to leave you to analyze the implications. Parents of children ages 7 to 17 must work 80 hours a month in order to qualify for SNAP. But in households where there are two parents who are married, only one of them has to work to still be able to receive SNAP benefits. That means single parents with kids as young as 8 must work, while people who are married to a working adult don't have to. 80% of single parent households are headed by mothers, per census data. Homeless people, veterans, pregnant women, and those under 18 or over 64 are exempt from these work requirements. Do with that what you will, and talk amongst yourselves as to what that means.
So we have breaking news coming in that President Trump's described big, beautiful budget bill has just passed the House after a marathon all-nighter debate. The bill passed with a 215-214 vote. That bill includes more money for defense and deportations, but cuts for Medicaid, Medicare, and SNAP benefits. It also keeps the president's tax structure from 2017 from expiring at the end of the year. The president's budget changes estimated to add nearly $4 trillion to the national deficit. The budget now moves to the Senate for a vote there.
The bill is passed.
It took some presidential arm twisting, but the House finally passed a huge bill that puts a lot of President Trump's agenda into action. The bill includes an extension of Trump's first-term tax cuts and a whole lot more, including billions in spending for defense and immigrant detention centers. But it's not law yet. The Senate still has to weigh in, and they're expected to make some big changes. So, what else is in the bill? First, the bill would make tips and overtime pay tax-free. Second, it would cut federal spending in a few ways. For example, it would add work requirements to qualify for Medicaid and tweak the rules for SNAP, the food assistance program. As a result, millions of low-income people would lose access to those programs. Third, the bill would roll back some of President Biden's clean energy incentives, like tax credits for EVs and climate projects. Fourth, private universities with large endowments like Harvard would see their taxes on investments go up dramatically. And finally, the bill would raise the country's debt ceiling by $4 trillion. So who will benefit the most from extending the tax cuts? According to experts, over 80% of households will get a tax cut in 2026 if the bill passes. But most of those benefits would go to wealthier households. The top 1% would receive an average tax cut of about $300,000, while middle-income households would see only an $1,800 tax cut on average. Now the bill heads to the Senate, and Republican senators have already signaled they'll push for a lot of revisions. Once they do, the House will have to agree all over again. With Republicans holding only a slim majority in Congress, they'll need nearly every member on board to pass the final version.
The Senate just passed Donald Trump's tax bill, and yes, all of his stated promises are in there, but what else is hiding in this bill might shock you. So after much debate and a long waiting process, the Senate has finally voted to proceed with the one big, beautiful bill. We're going to go through some of the main highlights of the bill and talk about some pros and cons so that you can prepare moving forward for what America's about to look like. One of the main highlights of the bill that everybody was keeping an eye on is no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. And it very much is in this bill. So the Senate text includes temporary changes that would allow Americans to deduct $25,000 for tipped wages and $2,500 for overtime pay through 2028. But the Senate made a change to the House's version, and it says that the Senate version also says that overtime and tip deductions will be reduced for Americans' income with higher than $150,000. So if you make under $150,000, no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. Next is going to be child tax credits. You can see that the bill increases the child tax credits from $2,000 to $2,200 and adjusts the amount for inflation after 2025. It's slightly different than the House plan to temporarily increase the credit to $2,500 before cutting it back to the current level and adjusting for inflation. And then we move to Medicaid, so it says that the Senate released an updated version of the legislation that includes several proposed changes to Medicaid. It says that the Senate plan would require able-bodied adults to work 40 hours per month until age 65 to qualify for benefits. There are carve-outs for parents of children under 14 and those with disabilities. It also includes language for tax on Medicaid, so it says the plan would also cap and gradually reduce the tax that states can impose on Medicaid providers. The phase-out would begin in 2028, ultimately ending in a 3.5% cap on the tax. And then there's a provision for the student loan overhaul, and it says that like the House-passed bill, the Senate plan would scrap several existing repayment options, including the Biden-era SAVE program that based payments on income and household size. It replaces them with a new standard repayment plan and an income-based repayment plan. It then also says that the bill would cap the amount that parents and graduate students can take out in federal loans each year. And then it goes on to say that one difference between the two bills concerns the Pell Grant program for low-income students. The House proposed increasing the credit hours required for full-time and part-time students in order to receive Pell Grants, but the Senate has left current enrollment rules intact. And then there's a clause for AI. It says that the Senate proposal allocates $500 million to Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which is focused on increasing broadband access for Americans and specifies that the funding can be used for developing artificial intelligence models and systems, but it also requires that states only receive funding if they do not regulate AI for 10 years. Now, a huge drawback on this bill, and one that's caused a lot of controversy, is that the legislation would raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion, going beyond the original $4 trillion outlined by the House. But it appears that after some cuts are made to the bill, the cost of it's going to be $4.45 trillion. But one important part of the bill that was cut out is the public lands provision. It says that the Senate version would order the sale of up to 0.5% of the public lands in 11 states. And it goes on to say that supporters of the provision say it would address the housing availability and affordability crisis. Now, Senator Mike Lee was the one that put that provision into the big, beautiful bill, but he decided to take it out and work with Trump separately so that companies like BlackRock and Vanguard aren't coming in and buying land to keep building more houses. So that's the main takeaways of the one big, beautiful bill. So it looks like Trump got some of his wishes, but not all of them. But boy, is this one going to cost a lot.